Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we have another great guest on the show. We've got Keith Sweeney here. He is going to regale us with tales from beyond well, no, not really. He's just going to regale us in tales of filmmaking. But before we dive in, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share these episodes and videos with everyone that you know. Help the channel grow. Here at the Movie Pope podcast, we like to do a few things here. We like to wear a lot of different hats. Yes, we love reviewing movies and talking about TV shows and saying what we think, if it sucks or if it's great. But we also like chatting to people who work in the industry, kind of get their perspective and their 2 cents on how they got started and their philosophy and advice for working in the industry. It's one of those things that you seldom see on movie podcasts. So I like to think we're blazing a trail here. So we like to think we're offering a public service. I mean, obviously nothing as great as the National Weather Service or FEMA, but we do our part. Keith, my man, how are you doing on this fine Saturday evening?
Doing pretty good, my friend. I hope you are.
Oh, well, I remember telling you earlier before we started recording about my day at the at the garage. It's that same feeling that you get, whenever you have to go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, well, it turns out your lifestyle may be killing you, so you may want to adjust a few things. And you're like, do I choose between taking high blood pressure medication or giving up the Slim Jim? It's
Oh, see, now that is a tough call because on a Saturday evening, who doesn't enjoy a Slim Jim?
Exactly. It's Sophie's choice, basically.
Yeah.
Can I and a legal disclaimer. I mean, here at the Movie Pope podcast, we do not wish to poke fun at anyone who suffers from any traumatic events, such as the Holocaust or any other genocidal events. We strongly condemn the perpetrators of such events, and we stand in support of the victims. And now back to regular programming. So, Keith, welcome to the show.
Sure.
Oh, that was ad-lib, by the way. Why didn't I just become an improvisational actor? Everyone keeps telling me I should do that. So Keith, great to have you on the show today. We actually connected through Juli Emmons of the Carolina film community. She kind of hooked us up a few months ago, and we kind of like hammered out the details to kind of set today as the day for our recording. So what I really want to chat with you about is kind of get your perspective on your work and what you do, and maybe offer some advice to up and coming filmmakers because I studied filmmaking at UNC Greensboro, and I kind of kick myself all the time in the butt because I feel like there are so many resources out there, but I didn't really try to access them. So I feel like this is sort of my penance to try to do that for others. So Keith, why don't you go ahead and introduce us, or introduce yourself to us, I should say, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, and what you do.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on the show. And our mutual friend Juli is a dynamic, amazing, influential character in my life, and I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have met her and connected with Charlotte film community on their inaugural foundation meeting 13 years ago, maybe. So I grew up in New England, and when I moved to the South, I had a very corporate lifestyle: hotel, hospitality, operations, management, numbers, front of the house, interconnections with people. And move forward in my life, I met my husband, and he was an artist, Blaine Miller, actor, writer, director, founder of the Perch live sketch comedy club here in Charlotte.
Oh, that's him?
That was him. That was my husband.
Oh my goodness! Because
right?
I've heard about this. Oh my god, this really is a small city.
He founded the Perch, and he had great success with the run of the Perch for many years. A couple of their writers went on to do big shows in New York, late night talk shows, and fantastic careers. Blaine was an artist, and he liked to create nonstop. He was writing, he was acting, he was directing, he was making models out of mannequins, you name it, he had his hands in it. Completely the opposite mindset of myself. Very corporate, very rigid, very structured. There was often a comparison that if you were to look at his speech patterns, it looked like a series of circles. And my speech patterns was a straight line through the middle. And most of the time, we didn't speak the same language, but occasionally those points would intersect. And my brother and best friend, DJ, and Blaine's best friend, Kathy, came together one day and decided that we wanted to form our own small local independent film production company here in Charlotte called Dalliance Films.
Mm-hmm.
And largely that was because Blaine had grown weary of trying to find the routes to get his own independent works picked up and or produced and or sold without living in LA, living in New York, having a massive agent. In the process, myself and Kathy became the executive producer side, whereas DJ and Blaine were the writer-creator side. Kathy would edit, I would network. And through our networking research, we found the Charlotte film community was getting ready to have their first meeting. Kathy and I got in the car, we went uptown. Juli was hosting the event in the basement of some lounge that no longer exists just off of Moorhead for the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And we were immediately hooked at the number of people that were all there for the same reason. Local voice talent, local screen talent, writers, actors, directors, all on the Charlotte scale, trying to find some community to help them achieve their goals, to water cooler conversation, to further their careers. And the concept was brilliant because it was a room full of people looking to collaborate. So we took advantage and became founding members, and we attended a meeting every month. And our exposure to the Charlotte film community just grew exponentially from there. We met so many people that we would have an opportunity to collaborate with, to help connect with other folks, to produce our own works. It was really quite an interesting beginning to our Dalliance film career. It gave us a lot of incentive and motivation to continue to produce and develop the things that we were working on.
Right.
And then after competing in the annual film events that the Charlotte film community would have, we had produced 2, 3, 4 short films, our own small independent feature-length film, a series of trailers that we were trying to shop around, and a number of other scripts. And we felt we were making good progress and tracks, end roads to getting our anything produced. And then recession smacked everybody down. All the potentially interested funds and talent that we had reached out to gain had dried up, and everybody was starting to hold on to their cash. So we had to kind of reevaluate what was going to happen.
Right.
And Blaine and Kathy continued to write. They continued to produce works that the hope was eventually we would be able to maybe shop the scripts around to get picked up. And one of Blaine's scripts even won an award from a competition out in LA, and they brought us out there to try to shop the script around to small companies like the Sci-Fi Channel at the time that made movies for $1 million. Unfortunately, that didn't work out in our favor, but we all continued to pursue things in our own right. DJ went on to be a script supervisor for major TV series, major streaming series, major motion pictures. Blaine continued to write and create. Kathy stayed on the corporate side, and I myself actually transitioned out of hospitality and tourism into actual on-set film work in the role of craft service. And so now, for the last 12 years, I have spent all of my film career taking care of cast and crew on film sets, everything from commercials and photo shoots to series and major motion pictures. And it's probably the most exciting, exhilarating, nerve-wracking change I've ever made in my entire life.
Well, I mean, well, that's fascinating because because when it comes to working in that side of the industry, whenever I've spoken with people who've gotten their start, it just seems like they're coming from a far left field because because when you hear their story, you're like, Really, you left that? Like that's a huge leap of faith. Like I mean, what made you decide that that this was something worth pursuing?
So if you're talking about the craft service side, I'll be quite honest. I didn't really have a choice. I tend to be one of those people that once I'm in my safety zone, once I've got my routine, once I've got the structure of the things that I can predict and I can manage,
Hmm.
I tend to stay there and I just finesse it, and I adjust as need be, but everything fits within a box. There's parameters, there's guidelines, there's 3-ring binders, there's procedures. And I had a lucrative career with a global brand here in Charlotte, and one day found myself out of a job. And it was the second time in 23 years of hospitality that I found myself in this situation. And I had lost all faith in my future. I wasn't sure where I was going, didn't want to invest myself again. And Blaine just looked at me and said, "Well, you should do craft service." I had no idea what that was. No clue. Had never been on set, but everybody in my life through Kathy, Blaine, DJ, Juli, they all worked in film. Everybody was some sort of artist or creator. And they all said, "Yeah, you should do that." So I sat my butt down and I logged onto the computer and I emailed everybody I could find in the North Carolina film directory,
Hmm.
basically asking for a conversation. After 11 emails, one person called me back and we spoke for 2 hours on the phone. And the next thing you know, I was helping this person on a Subway commercial, and they had introduced me to another craft service person who was playing the key role on the first season of Banshee, which was filmed here in Charlotte. And I went to meet her. 2 weeks later, I was working on her film set. And 3 weeks after that, I was running the show. She had apparently overbooked and needed to be in another city on another show and decided that I could handle it. So I went from a corporate hospitality career, managing things by the book, to being thrown into craft service on somebody else's truck with absolutely no clue what I was doing.
But that's the thing though, because when you've worked in the hospitality industry for an X number of years, when when you find yourself working at craft services, d- don't you think that it would sort of be like a smooth transition because most of the concepts, most of what you're doing is pretty similar?
Well, you would think that, but it required a lot of my rigid structure to be released.
Well, how so?
So a film crew is not a hotel guest. A hotel guest, you've got between 30 seconds and 3 minutes to form a relationship and hopefully develop some form of brand loyalty while meeting their standard expectations. There's a reason they choose this brand over that brand.
Right.
When they have a place to stay. And in a film set's nothing like that at all. These are not traveling businessmen with a corporate credit card. These are film crew that are in the trenches, often overworked, underpaid, maybe not given the respect that they deserve, and they're working 12 to 14-hour days.
Right.
And my misconception about craft service at first was that in addition to acquiring the things that they would need and providing them all day, I was also going to end up being their dad. And a lot of folks would come into the craft service truck and they would start helping themselves. And my brain could not wrap around that because you don't go to a restaurant, walk into the kitchen and cook your own steak. So,
Right.
But the reality is that everything that I would provide, everything that the team of craft service provided, it was our responsibility to protect it and to serve it, but it belongs to the crew. And the beauty when I had my awakening was that now, instead of between 30 seconds and 3 minutes, I have 3 weeks, 3 months, sometimes 6 months to develop relationships with these people on the film set, to get to know them, to know that this guy needs a PG tips at this part of the day. And this guy only prefers this type of gummy bear. And that is the thing that is going to get them through whatever hell has been wrapped upon them through the course of their film day. And while also giving them that bartender or barber safe haven when they come to the craft service truck, so that they could have a place to step away from the film set, the life that it is, and have that safe space, whether it's to simply decompress or share a good laugh or make themselves a sandwich and take a breath and then go back to work. The role went from corporate provider to dad. And
a caretaker, basically.
Okay. You know, if you really embrace what we do as craft service, our job is to pay attention to the crew, not just, you know, maintain the snacks and make sure their sandwiches out and make sure that the coffee's fresh and delicious and everybody has a LaCroix. It's to pay attention to the crew, to make sure that they are healthy and they are productive, and that if they look overworked, it's your job to notice and say something to somebody, or to pull somebody aside and give them a break. And quite often, a film set is filled with a lot of young folks that are trying to get into the industry in any way they know how. And, you know, if you see them struggling, you get an opportunity perhaps to have some sort of mentorship with somebody, give them a little guidance, dust them off, and put them back in the game. And I had no idea that this would end up being my role. And I cherish the relationships with the film set, the film family, my brothers and sisters, exponentially more than I ever cherished the relationships that I developed in the hotel industry, because I've got 6 months sometimes to learn to care about these people and what makes them special, the unique thing that they bring to their craft, which creates that group sense of pride on a film set. Whether you're hauling cable or serving coffee or setting a light or putting makeup on somebody's face, you know, it's 250 people sometimes to make somebody look good on screen for 30 seconds. And it's an appreciation that I never had for the industry prior to actually working in the industry.
So, I mean, that's so fascinating, because you're basically like Sam from Cheers. Everybody comes to you and you lend that sympathetic ear to kind of help them get through the day, basically.
I will take that compliment. Yes, sir.
I mean, but because that's the thing. Because and please forgive me for sounding so crass. I always just thought that, you know, that craft service people were kind of like, you know, at the bottom of the totem pole, because they really didn't do much apart from just put the spread out and just stand back and let people, you know, take what they want, and then you kind of clean up the scraps afterwards. But that isn't the case whatsoever, because, you know, because there's more to it than just simply putting food out for people to eat.
There is, as a matter of fact, and I hope you don't share that preconceived notion with any producers, because quite a few producers like to think that anybody with 2 coolers and a pickup truck can do craft service.
That's the impression I have gotten from some people. Just so
you know, not to say that we're all this person. We don't all obviously take the job the same way that I do, but I've made my life out of caring for other people in one fashion or another, and to find my personal niche and my personal approach, and then to share that with so many other craft service people. Like, there are examples. There's one guy. Here's a couple of good stories for you.
Yeah.
So there was this one guy who was an A camera on a show, and he was the biggest. He was the biggest asshole. Can I say that? He was the biggest asshole.
Yeah, you can. You can.
He was the biggest asshole I'd ever met on a film set. There was absolutely nothing that I could do that made his day better. Nothing. And then I found out one day that he had a penchant for a particular flavor brand of a gummy bear. And it wasn't something that I could get at a local store, so I had to order it. And then when I got it in, I just quietly slipped it on his cart that day and didn't say anything to him. And he never made it a point to seek out who brought them and say thank you. But the other 9 people in that department came by the truck one at a time to thank me for that little gesture, because for that day, he was a little bit less of an asshole to them. And that's the day that I knew that my job had more meaning than just making sure the coolers were full and the sandwiches came out at 4 hours. That was the first experience where I knew that I had what I did had an impact on these people that we spent the entire day with, sometimes months with at a time. And so my perception of how I approached my job from that one day with that one cameraman changed moving forward. There are some folks, there's a dolly grip that I know. He is the hardest working person I think I've ever witnessed. He will not stop and take a break. Doesn't matter. And my job, I took it upon myself, was to get in front of him, stand in front of him, get in his way, and make sure that he stopped for a moment, make sure that he drank some water, make sure that he ate something, because he wouldn't. And that is how I surround myself with folks that I think have the same approach. And we all don't like every single crew person on set. But if there are 3 of us working in craft service, we all have our favorites and we all have those that we dislike. But the rule is everybody on the film set gets one person, at least in craft service, who will take care of them when the others are like, nope, I don't want anything to do with that guy. So everybody gets attention, personalized one way or another. And if one of my partners does something for somebody that I don't care about, I'll give them a side eye, but I will definitely keep my mouth shut, because that's the job. Our job is to make sure that whoever it is, they have what they need to get through their day.
Right. So know your place, but kind of help keep things, moving along. Right.
Yeah. But we also have so much fun. There are so many incredibly cool stories. So watching a scene in the second Halloween movie that came out, have you seen it?
I haven't, no, but I've been wanting to see it.
There's a scene in there where there's a couple, a senior couple in their living room, and basically, you watch them get murdered. You watch them get slaughtered. And I watched the scene and I'm laughing because the couch that is directly behind the couple, I am on the floor on my knees behind that couch, hunkering down, because I was on set at that moment, passing snacks and beverages around to the film crew that were stuck inside the set and could not get out to Crafty when they called rolling, and I had to drop to my knee and hide behind the furniture. And then as soon as they called cut, I stood up again with this platter full of food and made my way around the room to all of the camera and the ADs and everybody else that did not have an opportunity to step out of an incredibly hot set to get something refreshing. So there's a lot of fun stories that relate in that fashion, and it's exciting. It's something I don't think I could have ever envisioned myself doing.
Now, did they know you were there?
A lot of the crew did, and they laugh. There's times where I get stuck in the bathroom, or I'm hunkered down right below somebody. I have so many of those stories where I'm hunkered down, somebody's walking by wearing very little attire, or I get stuck behind a bedpost during a lovemaking scene. Even though it's supposed to be a closed set, you get stuck sometimes when you're trying to get to and take care of your crew, or you're trying to clean up. And somebody calls action and you've got to hide. And then all of a sudden they call cut and you come around the corner with a platter of snacks and everybody starts cheering.
I just have this funny image of you like on a film set, like a World War II film set or Vietnam film set, and you're just like running through the grass, and they're like, "All right, action!" And you drop to the ground.
Yep. That is quite often exactly what it is. You have to watch where you're stepping because there's cable and track and a variety of equipment everywhere. You have to know which direction you can and cannot step. And is it too crowded in that corner? And then all of a sudden somebody calls, says cameras up, and you have to. If you're in the wrong place, you've got to tuck in a corner and you've got to drop to your knee. You could set something up outside, but then the 5 people that are at the door would get it and nobody in the set would have access to the snacks. So my job is to make sure that they do.
Okay. Yeah, because that leads me to the next question, because I've always assumed that craft services, they're kind of like tucked away like on the other side of the studio, and you're just standing there and people kind of go up to you in between breaks and kind of help themselves. But but from what you're saying, you've actually had to like roll up your sleeves, take the tray and run into the action, yourself to kind of, get the food out to these people.
Well, what I find interesting is that, my particular role on set varies based on the region. So it's craft service in LA versus New York versus Canada versus Charlotte are all very different in their approach. So I handle craft service the way that I was taught for this region. So yeah, we have a main setup someplace, 3 or 4 tables, 5 coolers, everything you can think of under the sun on the table. But that's 60% of the crew have the freedom to move around and come visit when they're feeling peckish. But then, pardon me, there's a whole other segment of the crew that they don't get that freedom. Usually the shooting crew, the camera, the ADs, the first AD, the director, right on set, they don't ever leave. They might send somebody to get something for them, but a human being's stomach goes from breakfast to 2 hours later, like, I could really use something. And then 2 hours later, they need something a little heftier because they still have 2 more hours before lunch. So finding what that is it a hot set? Is it cold outside? Is it smoky in there? Do you think they're dehydrated? And picking something that's going to help them get through, usually proteins of some sort, making sure there's a variety for every restriction, whether they don't eat nuts or they're allergic to dairy or they don't eat gluten. There's got to be something for everybody. And it's just a snack, but it's just enough to hold them through. We have to get into them if you take pride in your job to take care of the crew, because that's our job, is to care for them.
Now, another thing I want to kind of like just chat with you about. So catering, so craft service isn't the same as catering, correct?
Correct. Catering is 2 specific meals a day, usually a breakfast before call. It's a large to do, and then 6 hours in from call. They're almost always set up that way. It's union contract regulations, certain types of meals fed at certain times of day. Crew is given a break. But a 10-hour shoot day is a 12-hour workday for most people. A 12-hour workday is a 14 to 16-hour workday for most people. And those 2 meals are not enough. We are catering and craft service. We often help each other out, with a, hey, do you have any of this? Or I can't get to the store or whatever. But we are very much independent and apart from one another.
So I want to ask you a few more questions about craft service, because really this is a side of filmmaking you rarely hear about. So I'm really fascinated by this. So for starters, when it comes to let's say you're on a film project, right? Do you actively go out and find employment and say, hey, are you guys looking for a craft services person, or do they contact you? How does that work out?
I think the responsibility generally falls to the crew person. Technically, every single crew person on a film set is an independent contractor. Quite often, especially in the areas away from New York or LA, where there isn't an established studio system, a production will come into your town, and not only will they hire you as the key to run the department, but they will also hire you because you have the equipment, and they will lease the equipment from you, and that is often why you get the job. Most of the positions are unionized, so when a production comes into town, they will often ask the local union rep for the list, and they start from there. But quite often, it's also word of mouth. A UPM or a production supervisor has worked with you in this region in the past, and they just tell so-and-so, go ahead and call this guy, and that's your first conversation. And the first 5 or 6 years I was trying to cut my teeth in the industry, it was always a fight. I would look at the weekly newsletter from the union at potential and rumored upcoming productions, and I would reach out. I would search on IMDb for emails and contact information. I would travel into the Wilmington or Charleston or even the Savannah area and walk into a production office with my business card, my resume, and a tray full of snacks, and just try to get in front of somebody. But quite often a position like craft service is one of those that productions don't necessarily travel you for. Every show needs one, but if production doesn't value what you bring to the table in the same way that they would, a best boy, electric, a dimmer operator, et cetera, they won't do it. They'll just find anybody with a pickup truck and a couple of coolers and call it a day. There are some producers, however, that are smart enough to be incredibly pro crew, and they know a crew runs on their stomach and they need somebody to do the job. And once I've had the opportunity to get a couple of really good projects under my belt and start making friends with people on set, because I started letting go of my control issues, I started developing that network, and largely the network is how we get our jobs now. I mean, there's always a list, but it never hurts to have friends who can recommend you when they get the call before you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So this leads me to another question, and this may sound like a dumb question.
Not at all.
Is there a union for craft services people?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
we belong in IATSE, IATSE. My local district in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Savannah is 491.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard of those guys, but I never thought craft services people fell under that.
Well, we didn't used to. I think Crafty started falling under IA probably right around the same time that I got into the business, maybe a little before. I'm kind of fuzzy on the numbers, but from the stories I've heard or things I've been told, is it wasn't always covered.
Okay, so this is more of just a recent thing then, right?
Yeah. So, but obviously North Carolina is a right to work state, so the production doesn't have to hire a union craft service from out of town. However, if it's a union show and there's a craft service person available in that union district and the show doesn't hire them, they will receive pressure from the union that says, you have a non-union person working a union position on a union show. You need to hire this. And they may or may not cave, but it's generally not an issue. Has been smaller budgets tend to be a little more particular because of where they're putting the money. Larger budget shows are like, yeah, whatever, let's throw cash at it and see what happens.
So is there a benefit to being in IATSE, or does that just depend on where you mainly work?
I absolutely think that there is a benefit. When I was a younger man, I didn't so much believe in the unity of brotherhood and union strong, etc. But I've come to find out, especially working on a film set, being surrounded by as many unions as are represented in film production, that as complicated as the politics may be on occasion, there really is strength. There really is protection. There really is solidarity. And, the corporate dollar is the corporate dollar. Not every UPM or executive producer is an asshole, but their job is still to represent the studio and to get the job done. And some of them are willing to push the boundaries of their crew a little bit. And that is where the union steps in and says, no, you can't do that. You can't do that at all. We'll walk out on your ass. Or if you want to continue to do that, that's fine, but it's going to cost you this. Whereas a non-represented position doesn't have those protections and quite often gets taken advantage of. Our PAs, for example, production assistants, a show does not get done. Nothing is produced without PAs on set. They're often young folks right out of film school trying to get their teeth cut, make connections, figure out where they want to be in this industry, and they're not represented by union protection. And so they're very easily abused or overworked, and they're underpaid and sometimes in unsafe conditions. And that's one of those things that a lot of the unions and districts are trying to fight for. But it's just an example. I think that if my position wasn't protected, I might face similar circumstances.
Yeah, and that's what we saw last year with the two strikes, because there's this concern that that they aren't being I guess treated very well, especially with the rise of AI. But do you do you think your union or any unions that are similar, do you think that there might come a point where they kind of feel like, what, enough's enough? Because from what you're telling me, it sounds like y'all are a pretty patient bunch. Like, you can just take it on the chin and keep going.
Well, I don't know that that's. It really depends on the day. So I'm going to say largely, I think the union is always going to be the benefit. There are obviously going to be those of us that have discontent. A lot of misconception is the union is not an employment service. Their job is not to find you a job. Their job is to protect you when you have one, to represent you, to put your name in front of other people. It's up to you as the crew person to do the job and maintain it. It's the union's job to help negotiate on your behalf for the hourly rates and when you get breaks. But landing the job, that's not their role. So a lot of people get mad about that. And then some folks get mad about the politics, because every union, every representative of a union is going to approach their job a little differently. And a crew person might think that they should do it this way instead of that way. There's always going to be grumblings, but my personal opinion, my personal experience is that it's better to have than to not. With the strikes, however, it's a different approach it's a different concept to take 6 or 8 months of unemployment as a knock on the chin versus, a 14-hour day in rough conditions and bad weather, and then get mad because production just bought you pizza at the end of the day. But that's a day. You get to go home. You may be tired come Monday because you didn't get your full turnaround, and the studio might have tried to break a contract by forcing you to come in earlier. But those individual experiences are not as prevalent as just simply being on strike, where it is in your face every single day that you're not taking in any money, that you're getting further behind, that you may have to sell your house, kind of stuff. So it's definitely a different blow to the chin.
Right. So Keith, I mean, do you? I'm trying to find a way to phrase it that doesn't sound, too disrespectful. But if someone, if someone wants to break into the film industry, why would they consider looking at craft services, for instance, as opposed to thinking
That's an easy one.
or
That's actually an easy one. Every single person on set, every single person from the executive producer down to a PA, every single person knows who craft service is. Every single one of them. They all know who Crafty is. Crafty knows who all of they are, because it's our job to know who they are. In a 14-hour day, it doesn't matter who you are. You need a cup of coffee, you need a bottle of water, you need a sandwich, you need a bag of sour pickles, you need a Reese peanut butter cup. Everybody knows who Crafty is. And if you want to do something else in film, Crafty is one of the best positions to be able to network. You get on set. If you're in Crafty and you want to be a stuntman, if you want to work in electric, if you want to work in props, as long as you put in the effort while you're doing your craft service job to take a moment and engage with somebody in that desired field path, you're going to make a friend. You're going to have this opportunity to ask questions. And on a 4.5 month show running 10 episodes, you have lots of time to talk to whoever's in props and find out about the art department. You have lots of time to interact with set deck as they come and go during the day. You get the chance to make that personal connection and find an end road to get where you want to go. And I'm all about that. Younger me in a corporate career was trained somebody to stay in one position. I can't hold people back anymore. I can't look at somebody and say, well, you only want this one show because you're going to do that. And I can't keep training people. I need somebody that's going to stick with me. My job is to help you. If you come into my department, if you work on one of my trucks and you're on craft service, as long as you are doing all of the work that I need you to do, if that helps you further your career path into something else, I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to be so proud of you, because you took advantage of that opportunity and you owned it and you made it yours. And there are quite a few examples in my career where that's exactly what happened. Some of my favorite people in other departments started in mine, and they took advantage of getting to know the crew simply by taking care of them.
So that leads me to another question. So So there have been instances where you've taken people under your wing and they've said, you know what, I do like working in props, or I do want to learn more about cinematography or this and that. Did you kind of like push them in that direction, or did you kind of say, hey, maybe you should go talk to this person, or did you kind of talk to whoever was in charge of that department, say, hey, I got someone here who might be interested in maybe doing this work? How did that play out?
All of the above. There have been at least 6 that I'm aware of that have started in my department that I took in for one reason or another and have had an opportunity to move on and do other things. And whether it's me encouraging them to, hey, deliver this to so-and-so and strike up a conversation, or me mentioning to somebody in a key in another department who I happen to be friends with, or I have taken care of over the years, hey, would you talk to this person and at least give them some guidance or something? Any means necessary. I'm a father and a grandfather, and I've spent my life taking care of other people in various fashions, not just cooking for them and putting Band-Aids on their knees, but giving them support. And, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I learned to adapt the lift each other up concept in my personal approach to life. And, I think craft service is a great avenue for me personally to pursue that. If I can help somebody do something better for themselves, then I have made my mark. I may not be getting my name on the screen as written and directed or acted, but I'm making my mark. I'm important to somebody because I've helped them get someplace else. And that, to me, at the end of the day, is my reward.
So yeah, basically you're paying it forward.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So Keith, I definitely do want to be respectful of your time, but I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. And I definitely do want to bring you back because there are so many more questions boiling in my mind about craft services. I mean, because think about it, you guys are the unsung heroes of the film set, and from what you've told me tonight, you guys are really like the essential people, because if you hadn't gotten those special flavor gummy bears, I mean, my God, that could have gone in a whole nother direction.
And I like to think that we are the unsung heroes. Did you know that Jamie Lee Curtis, God love her, I love working on her sets, but she does not like working at night. You know how she gets through it? M&Ms. That's how she gets through working at night. She eats M&Ms. That is what keeps her focused. That is her energy. That is her caffeine. That is her. All right. I'm gonna get this done. Consummate professional that she is. But Frances McDormand, she likes to sit on the tailgate of a grip truck and watch the sunset if everybody else is doing it and we're in a good location. So you find these moments with these people, and for me, I find those moments through giving them that little thing. But having a bag of peanut M&Ms in the freezer, or a jar of Nutella hidden in the back of a refrigerator someplace for an actor, those are the cool stories. Those are my favorite parts of what I do. In addition to the interactions and the lifting them up, because trust me, 120 brothers and sisters occasionally get on your nerves. Because we're all adults, and the trash can is right there. But it's probably I think the most rewarding career experience that I've had in my life. And when I was a younger man, I would have never envisioned this for myself. I had a very rigid and structured vision of my future, and the color and the texture and the fabric of the people on a film set that make movies and TV shows and even commercials come alive it continues to blow me away to this day. And I consider it a gift that I get to experience it through the means that I was given when I was born. This way, this is my thing, and I get to be a part of it. And it's an awesome experience for me.
Well, Keith, you really, really are a trooper, and I salute you. I really do, because I mean, you never think about it until you hear about it, but then when you do, it's like, wow, like you really, really do make a difference. So Keith, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, I do have an IMDb page. I don't know that I've ever received messages from there. But I also have, I can be reached through my website. It's keithcraftservice.com. My phone number is on there. A link to my craft service Instagram page is there. and hey, put my name out there because it's filming season and everybody's gearing up and daddy needs to work.
Yeah, and the strikes are over now, so I mean, there should definitely be more, within the next few months. But Keith, before we wrap up, as this is a movie podcast, I have to ask the obligatory question:
As you should.
Is there a movie or TV show that you've seen recently that you feel like is the best thing ever? You just want to get on the rooftop and shout to everybody.
Wow. So oddly enough, I don't know if recently falls into my category, but I have three movies that are always my go-to based on my need.
Okay.
My first is The King's Speech. For watching because of the message of the relationship in that. The next one is the J.J. Abrams release of Star Trek in 2009.
Oh, the first one, right?
Yeah, the reimagining with Chris Pine as Captain.
Okay.
Yeah. That is my disconnect me from the world, get involved, and just watching a movie release. And honestly, one of the two favorites that I've worked on were Halloween, the first of the three that came out a few years ago with Jamie Lee Curtis, was a fantastic experience, as was Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, which was filmed up in Asheville. Those movies, as heavy as they may be, they fill me with pride, they fill me with joy. If anybody ever mentions it, I don't care if I've seen them 100 times. Put them on. Let's watch.
I did. I mean, you're the first person to actually mention a Star Trek movie, so that leads me to ask: Are you a Trekkie?
Oh my God! if there's a bit of Star Trek trivia, I'm your guy.
Just out of curiosity, do you watch the Shuttle Pod show?
Not yet, but now that I'm hearing about it, I'm curious.
Yeah. So have you ever seen them? Have you ever seen Enterprise?
Yeah, of course.
So basically, the guy who plays Trip and the guy who plays Reed,
yeah,
they started a podcast, I think 2 years ago.
Oh my God!
And I mean, they've had everybody from Jonathan Frakes to LeVar Burton to people who work in every aspect of Trek. Of the Trek shows, and it's because of them that inspired me to launch this podcast, because they brought in so many people who worked everywhere from craft services to like set design to props, and just gave them voice to talk about about their work. So,
well, now I have a lot of homework to do. I've watched Ready Room with Will Wheaton continuously, for years, but now a Shuttle Pod, huh? Okay.
It's called the Shuttle Pod Show. In their most recent episode, they had George Takei on there.
Oh my God.
I think you would love that podcast, just because just because they just talk Trek throughout the show. Well, and you'll love the segment too. They have a segment where they do Star Trek trivia, where basically basically the producer is playing against the two hosts, and they try to answer Star Trek trivia. And what's even funnier is that sometimes they'll ask them, trivial questions about what happened on Enterprise, and the two actors are like, "I don't remember any of this." I'm like, "Are you freaking serious? You guys were in it 80% of the time."
Wow. So I have a lot of homework to do now, and I'm going to pull out my Audible any minute. And but it's funny that you mentioned Enterprise, because I'm introducing my partner to Star Trek. He grew up a Star Wars fan, and I'm introducing him to Star Trek. And all the reasons that I live my life the way that I do, that come from my life watching Star Trek. And he's just started watching Enterprise, and we're still in the first season. And me being the nerd that I am, I get to go back and say, ooh, right here, you this thing that just happened. This is why in Next Generation or all the other shows, these procedures are taken for granted, because they were made here. Yellow alert means shields up and automatically puts power to the phasers and all that stuff.
Yeah, don't forget about the Prime Directive too.
Exactly. We just watched that the episode last night, where Captain Archer came across the planet with Dr. Phlox, and there's two species there that live together, and one of them
yes.
That's the one. I was like, this is the foundation of the medical Prime Directive. They can't interfere. They can't give them warp drive. He's like, oh, really? I was like, yep, this is the foundation right here.
So you know what my favorite episode is?
Please.
It's the one where a certain Brent Spiner returned to play Dr. Eric Sung.
Oh yeah.
And he's got the and he's got the they're not the descendants, but they're like sort of like the super babies from from the eugenics wars. And oh my god, he does such a wonderful performance. I've seriously considered emailing the podcast asking them, when the hell are you getting Scott Bakula on? Because and nothing against Bill Shatner. I think Scott Bakula plays a wonderful Captain Archer.
His role was designed to be, he wasn't the swarthy swashbuckling. He was designed to represent the original wholesome idea of what the Federation was intended to be, helping one another out. They needed a wholesomeness. They needed a grounding center of integrity and good intention. And Captain Archer was written to be that character. And Scott Bakula nailed it all the way from beginning to end. And speaking of Brent Spiner, good for that actor getting to play 15 different roles over the course of his Star Trek career.
All of them named Sue, by the way.
All named Sue, by the way. But funny story is many years ago, before I met my husband, he was in LA and he was in a grocery store with our son, and he was being fussy, and Brent Spiner picked him up and held him, and he calmed down while my husband was checking out at the counter. And then years later, I met him when he worked on Outcast, filmed up here in Charlotte. And I just had one of those nerd moments where I walked in and the base camp PA brought me in because she knew I was a Star Trek freak. And then I walked in and I froze and I just smiled at him. I shook his hand and I didn't even get a selfie and I was so mad. But, what an incredibly nice guy. And God, yeah. Now, see,
the one last question I want to ask you: what did you think about the series finale? These Are the Voyages. Because I was ambivalent, to be honest with you. I could care less either way, but I know that episode has a lot of haters, so I just want to see what you thought.
The only reason I had to be bothered by the episode was that at the time it was cut off, and I felt that there was so much more Trek to tell, and I was a little bothered by the fact that it was written to be deliberately bland. But you're also coming off of, if you're a true Star Trek fan, you're now
Legacy Trek. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you're mentally comparing it to the season finale of Voyager, where it bursts through the warp tunnel to meet the Starfleet ships that then escort her home. You're comparing it to the end of Next Generation, where all of a sudden, after 7 years, Picard is sitting down at a table playing cards with his crew, going, "I should have done this sooner." So, next to those previous emotional experiences, if you're connected with Trek, the ending of Enterprise was kind of ambivalent and neutral, but it left the page open to continue writing the stories and continuous adventures. I didn't get the sense from that episode that it was finished, but I didn't get the sense from that episode that it was coming back either.
Well, I was going to say, because there was an episode where they were interviewing Doug Drexler, and Doug basically said, had they been given another 3 seasons, when season 5 came along, they would have done a refit to the Enterprise, to the NX-01. Yep. So the NX-01 would have begun to look like a nascent Constitution class starship with the secondary hull and everything. Oh my God! Okay, seriously, we need to set up. We need to set up a time where we talk nothing but Trek. Like,
I would love that.
And Keith, you want to know what's funny is that I've got, because I'm a huge science fiction fan, but I have more Star Trek T-shirts than I do Star Wars T-shirts. That should tell you something right there. And I don't want to give, and I feel like I'm giving away my age, but I was born 2 months after the premiere of Next Generation, so
God,
I have a huge connection to that. And you know how a lot of people say, which Star Trek show is their favorite? Mine was Enterprise, because I came of age when that show came out. So,
I get that.
So people,
1,000%.
So people can say Enterprise sucks because the intro, the song was inappropriate, blah 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 blah. I'm like, I'm like, dude, shut up. I mean, for what it's worth, this laid the foundation for what Trek would be. So I'm sorry, but you can go screw yourself if you don't like it. But that's my show you're talking about.
No, I get it. I get it 1,000%. I do have to skip past the song, but I do know it by heart because I understand the human connection, the striving for greatness that we're going to overcome and achieve emotional sentiment that's connected to every word in that song. But having watched the original series, on WPIX out of New York late at night as a kid when I was watching, when I was babysitting, and then Next Generation when I was a young teenager coming into my own identity and trying to find my place in the world, and the messages that Star Trek would send, and then the more dark and religious profile of DS9, and then Voyager, the resolute approach to life and humanity, and everybody looks out for one another, is part of my religious upbringing through Star Trek. And then Enterprise came out, and I love the historical data. It gives me such a sense of all of the things that I fell in love with and getting to witness how they came to be. But the song, I'm like, no, I gotta skip past this, or I'll mute it, because I love watching the opening credits. I love watching the sequence as Enterprise grows from a clipper ship to a starship.
Excellent. Well, before we get carried away, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and Keith, once again, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Absolutely, my pleasure, friend. Thank you so much.